Thank you so much for attending, squeezing this in between classes. This is Freelance First Steps, how to go from idea to launch. There's so much to share with you all. So I'm going to touch on a high level, but feel free to reach out to me. We can always go deeper in one-on-one advising appointments. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Maria Salepi. I'm an artist, an entrepreneur, and the Associate Director of Creative Entrepreneurship. It's a new program, and so we are building out the resources as we speak, which is really exciting. I want to introduce one of our newest teammates on the Creative Careers team, which is Kayla Carrillo. She's sitting in here. And I do advising and do all things creative entrepreneurship. Kayla supports creative careers. She does advising as well, and it's focused on resumes and cover letters, um, networking, applying for jobs, all that stuff. And yeah, so I just wanted to introduce her and myself. And before we get into the meat of the session, you all are the first students to hear this, but Creative Careers has a new website. It's artcentercc.com. And on there, you'll find the creative entrepreneurship page, which we'll be building out. So every time you come, you'll see more content there. This is what it looks like right now. And the video resource library will be adding to it. The goal is that there'd be like, maybe 12 to 15 videos by the end of the term. They're all really short. What I noticed was that students have very specific questions around creative entrepreneurship. And so what I've done is I've taken the top questions that students have, like how do I set my rate and do I need a contract and things like that. And these videos are focused on answering one specific question. So they're like 2 to 3 minutes long. And then for most of them, they'll have a worksheet so that you can then take what you just learned in the video and be able to apply it. So definitely check that out when you get a chance. And then, as I mentioned before, I offer one-on-one advising. You can book through Connect. Um, and then freelance focused workshops like this one. And then Art Market, which we just did. So I don't think any of you participated this time, but maybe you were there as a customer. And we'll be rolling out more and more video or more and more programming. Okay. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to talk about how do you define your offering, how do you identify your target audience, then communicating your impact, showing your work, attracting clients, protecting your time, getting paid, and then we'll do a recap. There'll be time for Q&A afterwards. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as you're thinking about them. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll look at the chat and can answer them. And also we'll take any questions as well if you want to speak them. Okay, so first, let's talk about mindset because this is really important. You're not just freelancing, you're running a tiny creative business. And so as soon as you understand that, you will be more successful because you'll be thinking about all aspects of the business, not just the work part. So this means that you wear all hats. So you wear the creative hat, of course. You're like doing the thing that the deliverable, the thing that they're asking for and paying you for. You're also a marketer. You're telling people about your business. You're, finding out who might need your services, your offering. You're positioning it. You're building your brand around it. You're also the CEO, so that you're making all the decisions. You're deciding what your strategy is, what type of offerings you want, who should be your target audience. And then you're also the accountant. So you're making sure that you get paid. You're sending out invoices. You're tracking the money coming in so that you're prepared when it comes to tax time to just make that as easy as possible. So you wear a lot more hats, but you have more freedom. You have more autonomy. You have potential to make more money than you would in a, full-time role at a company. Defining your offering. So this is about moving from vague statements like I do logos or I do branding to having a very clear marketable offering that communicates the impact that you make on a client's business. Not what you do, but the impact that you deliver. And there's a big difference. So this is about turning your skills, which you are all like really focused on right now, as you should be in school, into a marketable service or offering. And the key is to find the balance of what you love doing and the practicality of like, is there a market for that? So connecting the work you want to do with a problem that people need help solving and are willing to pay you for. The Ikigai is a great framework. I'm curious, show of hands, how many people have heard of Ikigai or used it? Okay, cool. This is a really powerful framework for identifying kind of all those things, the four components. Let me show it to you. This is what it looks like. And just so you know, I will send this deck to you, to everyone who registered. So you will have this. So take notes, but I will also give this to you. And well, you'll see there's a downloadable worksheet, so you can do this for yourself. So Ikigai is it's a Japanese concept and it means reason for being or sense of purpose. And so you can see when you fill out these quadrants, like what are things you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? What can you get paid for? And if you're able to find the thing that can touch all of those boxes or circles, that is you are in your like full power, right? Like you are at your full potential of your skills. You're in a flow state and you're getting paid for it. So I'm going to use Lynn as our fictitious graphic design student, and here's her Ikigai. So you can see Lynn loves playing with color. She loves drawing, typography, sustainability, innovation. She's really good at conveying emotions through her drawings and designs. She loves visual problem solving, meeting deadlines, and collaborating with others. She's noticed that the world needs better design, sustainable solutions, more empathy, and people will pay her for branding, developing sustainable packaging and design solutions for their business. So, based on all of that, her ikigai could be I create emotionally resonant, sustainable design solutions from branding to packaging that connect with people. It solves real world problems and it helps businesses do better by the planet. Now, this is her guide. This is her North Star. This is the thing as the CEO of her small creative business. She's always focused on this. This is her like guiding principle, her guiding light. You can download the Ikigai worksheet on the website that I showed you. It's creativecareerscc.com. And you'll be able to see this. You can download it and do it for yourself. Okay. Next, let's talk about identifying your target audience. This is really important because your audience, when you identify your audience, then you can really understand what their needs are, like what are their biggest pain points and challenges, and then your business helps solve that, right? So like you're able to then think about not the work that you want to do, but like what is the challenge that your clients have and how does your skills solve for them? So, audience strategy is you want to make a list of the people or companies that need your service you're offering. Who are the companies that you think would be like great clients for you for the kind of work that you want to do? And if you get stuck, you should try to make a list of like 20. Um, if you get stuck coming up with people or companies that would be like the people you'd reach out to kind of pitch your services, then you can ask questions like, who hires creatives like you? Are there other people getting paid for the kind of work that you want to do? What pain points do your skills solve? And like what clients might have that problem? So let's use Lynn again as an example. And her ideal client list. So she sat down and she wrote all these are companies, um, kind of small local companies that she's like, this would be my dream client list for various reasons. So she's made a list. It's longer than this, aim for 20, but this is the top of her list. And based on that, you want to create an ideal client profile, an ICP. And an ICP is not a single customer, it's a composite of characteristics that define the type of customer that is your best case scenario. So this means it's like this is your dream clients. They are looking for problems. They have the problem that you want to solve, right? And it's a match values wise. And it's important to do this because it helps you stay focused on your messaging and your offering, really tailoring it. So to make your ideal client profile, you would ask these questions or answer these questions. And by answering these questions, you will have made your ICP. Um, and like, what role does your client have at the company? What industry are they in? Where are they located? What problems are they trying to solve, et cetera. And some of these questions might not be as relevant. Like, say maybe you don't really care what size company it is. That might not be as important to you. Maybe there's something else that is important to you. Maybe, um, it's important that they're really involved with like charities or not, it's a nonprofit or something. So you can tweak these questions based on what your needs and interests are, but this is a really good start. By answering these questions, you will have an ICP. So here's Lynn's. We'll use Lynn as an example. So Lynn has identified the role that her ideal client is. They're like a creative director or art director, brand manager, or head of marketing. They're in sustainable fashion or lifestyle, maybe premium food and beverage or social impact. They're located in LA because Lynn wants to stay in LA. They're trying to solve, like perhaps their visual identity or packaging doesn't reflect their values, or maybe they're in a really crowded market and they need a branding or packaging that really differentiates them. So those are very specific problems that Lynn is going to focus on. And their primary goal, the company, her client's primary goal is advancing sustainable practices. They value design, creativity, problem solving, and innovation. And they make beautifully crafted or ethically driven consumer goods. They serve conscious consumers, and the size can range from startup to medium size, maybe under 200 people. So this is Lynn's ICP based on her offering. And by defining your ideal client, you can tailor your messaging and offering so it better fits their needs, right? What we identified, Lynn's, like the problem that they're trying to solve, their visual identity or packaging doesn't reflect their values. That's very specific. You can imagine taking that, and now Lynn can speak directly to that pain point. That's going to be much more powerful than if Lynn goes to a potential client as like, oh, I do logos, I do branding as opposed to like, I'm actually an expert at helping brands really communicate their values through their visual design, you know? An ICP helps you focus your efforts on clients that and projects that are going to bring out your best, right? We're not passionate about everything. And so an ICP is a way to help you. It gives you a brief of like what clients, what industries should you be focusing on when you're doing outreach. Um, and it's going to bring out you're going to do your best work because it's going to be projects that you're passionate about, and the kind of problems that you really like solving. Once you identify your ICP, then you want to create a spreadsheet and make a running list. Like have like at least 20 different people that would be your ideal client. And then as you're out in the world and you're reading articles or going to events and you hear about different companies that are really exciting, you add them to your ICP list. So you want to continuously be adding to this spreadsheet because this is where you're going to go fishing, right? This is the list that you're going to reach out to and kind of be pitching and your services or kind of getting networking into them, like building relationships with people at those companies. You also want to make sure that you test assumptions. Conduct a few informational interviews with potential clients to see if they really have the problem that you think they do. This is also a great way to build relationships, right? Because you're not asking for anything, you're not selling anything. You're asking for like a 20-minute informational interview or informational chat to validate your research or to validate your assumptions. Okay, communicating your impact. And again, if any of you have questions, if questions come up, just put them in the chat so I can answer them when we're done with the presentation. Okay, communicating your impact. You want to focus on the problem that you're focus on the problem you're solving. So many freelancers make a mistake of focusing on their skills or their tools. So they'll talk about like, oh, I do design or I do illustration or I do branding. But what you want to focus on is the outcome, not the process. This is a really big difference. So what changes as a result of your work, right? Every offering or service should promise a transformation. You know, you help your clients go from X to Y because it's not like people want branding for branding's sake. They want branding because they want to attract more clients, right? Or they want to elevate their brand. They want to be seen, in a different way. So they all are seeking an outcome. So what you want to focus on is what is that outcome that they want? And then you can speak to it when you're talking about your service. A transformation statement quickly communicates the value that your service provides. It's also a great elevator pitch. And you can use this template to start. And do you see how you focus on the people? Again, it comes back to like, who are you serving? It's all about your target audience. And then the problem you solve. The tool comes after. Um, so, you help whatever target audience achieve specific outcome through your branding, right? Or through your logos. Now, just to show you how powerful this is, I'm going to show you the difference. Okay, so here's what maybe kind of students typically or freelancers when they're first starting out, they might say like, "Oh, I design logos. Like I'm your logo person." But instead of that, you could say, "I help early stage startups express their identity clearly so they can attract investors and customers." Do you see the difference? You know? Here's another example. I create unique illustrations. Or I help small business owners show up confidently and consistently with images that make their brand feel credible and relatable. Do you see how this statement really is so powerful because it identifies who they work with, who they help, and the final outcome of that work? You can download the transformation statement worksheet at the Art Center CC website and go, this is all under creative entrepreneurship. Um, and yeah, it's only going to be growing, the video library and the resources that you can download. Okay, showing your work. There is a big difference between a portfolio website and a business website. And so let's talk about that. One is showcasing talent, and the other is selling a service. Um, a portfolio site is about you, your process, your work. A customer focused site is about them, their problem, and how you can help them. So, elements of a business website, there's a clear offering. Here's what I do. It mentions who it's for. There's usually results. So it could be like case studies, testimonials is very common. And then there's a contact or a booking button. So look at some examples so you can see. So on the left-hand side is, so Adam Rosendahl is these are both of his websites. On the left-hand side is his company called Late Night Art. And you can see here, the first thing you read, humanizing the workplace. That's the impact, right? He's not talking about how he does it. He's talking about like this is what I deliver. When you hire me, this is what you get. Um, and then it's down here, it says our virtual and in-person events. So then he says what it is, right? His method. And then again, the impact accelerates connection, creativity, and humanity in the workplace. When you scroll below, there's testimonials. On the right-hand side is his personal website. And so you can see he's the founder of Late Night Art, but he also does a lot of other things, right? So this is his portfolio website. He does beautiful illustrations. He offers training. He does coaching. He's a DJ, so he puts these, he's a really, actually, I love his playlist. He does a monthly playlist. And he also does, has a monthly newsletter. So you can see his big difference, right? In like understanding when someone comes to your site, who are you talking to and what do you want them to do? What do you want them to what do you want them to do and how are you going to convince them to do that, right? And so what you can do is what's really powerful is talking about your impact. Um, Now I want to show a few more examples. So I am going to escape out of this and here's a few more. So this is Ivan Cash. And here, this is an artist website. So you can see award-winning artist and filmmaker. I think I mean I shrunk this. It's normally not this small, but so you can see then he goes right into his portfolio, right? These are all of his projects divided by category. This is interactive projects. And then he does speaking, right? So this is kind of as an artist, he does speaking, that's that section. He does interactive projects, that's this section, and he does films. Now, he also has a studio, and this is Ivan Cash's business. And so you can see here, what does he start out with? We make culture defining creative work, igniting humanity through storytelling. So he does talk about the what, but then he quickly says what the impact is, igniting humanity through storytelling, right? That's the like, when you hire him, that's what he's going to do for you. And then there's testimonials. These are all testimonials. You know, he's showing some of his work, but then testimonials. Um, let's look at a few more. We saw Adams. Let me show you his. So this is his business site. Do you see there's the button, there's the call to action. You wouldn't have that on a portfolio site, right? And then down here, his clients, that's always really compelling. It's like, oh, okay, this guy's vetted. Look at all these amazing clients he's worked with. And then there's more proof, social proof, right? Here's now there's like testimonials and quotes. He got a write-up in Harvard Business Review. Um, Here he talks about this is the offering or like the impact, right? Team growth, leadership. This is the why you would hire him. A different kind of ROI. Again, the impact that he delivers. I thought he had testimonials too. Let's look at a couple more. Okay, what do you think about this person? Is this business or portfolio? Raise your hand if you think it's a business site. What about if it's portfolio site? Yeah. 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 And Chloe is a freelancer. So people do hire her. She's not a full-time employee, but this is very much set up as a portfolio site. Here's another one. This is an independent, he's a freelancer, but this is set up like a portfolio site. Um, Here's another person. These are all alum, or most of them are alum, not the first two. This is set up as a business, right? Talks about projects. Here's like the offerings that you can hire. We are impatient optimists. Let's get started. Our story, contact. All right, we'll do one more. So this is also an independent business owner, And here, look, she starts out with the delivery. I create world full of love, humanity, curiosity, joy, and play. Here's her offerings. This one's kind of in between a little bit. I feel like it's a little bit of a personal website, but it's also a little bit of a business website. A brighter future is possible. That's kind of maybe that's her impact or what she's selling. Um, so you get the idea. There is a big difference between a portfolio site and um, a business site. Okay, attracting clients. So you want to move from waiting for work to come to you to generating opportunities. And that's what I found. Creative entrepreneurs, it's very much a mindset. And they are about an entrepreneurial mindset, I think at its core is about creating opportunities for yourself, right? You don't sit back and wait for it to come to you, you make it happen. And your biggest resource, everyone's biggest resource is your community. And I'm using community instead of network because I know network has kind of a negative connotation. It's your community. It's your professional community. It's your creative community. You want to tap into the people that know you, that it doesn't have to be super close too. In fact, a lot of times it's what they call weak ties. And a weak tie is someone you've met once or twice, is where a lot of jobs come from and referrals come from. But 67% of freelancers report that referrals and word of mouth is the top way that they get new clients. And so this means that you all, because you're starting out, so your community is smaller than it will be in 3 years, right? 5 years. But that's okay. You've already started to build your community, your professional community. It started the day you joined Art Center. It's your classmates, it's your instructors, it's the people that you meet, when you go to like career chats or talks or anything like that. Um, you want to be linking them in. Make connections when you can. Take advantage of opportunities to like introduce yourself after like a career chat or something. Grab their business card and link them in. You don't want to wait till you're looking for a job or looking for a client to be like, oh, now I've got to engage my community. So one way to do it, to tap into your community is to send a letter. Um, Also posting about your work, even just sharing process, like your process of it doesn't have to be finished work, is marketing. You want to use platforms that your audience uses. So, is that Instagram? Is it LinkedIn? Sometimes people will offer a starter service to get testimonials. Testimonials are really powerful, especially when you're starting out. You don't have a big reputation yet. You don't have like a powerful brand. The testimonials really help to build that. And then over time, you'll get more referrals than cold outreach. Right now you'll probably have to do a lot of cold outreach because you're building, you're just getting started, and that's normal. But you really want to get to a place where more of your work is coming through referrals. Okay, so a letter to your community. Um, you want to have a clear ask. You want to personalize the first sentence or two. Um, and you want to keep it short, right? If someone receives a really long email with like your whole life story, they're not going to read any of it. So try to keep it to like, I don't know, 3 to 5 sentences would be great. Or maybe more than three, maybe 5 to 7 sentences. But here's an example. Hey, it was great to see you at the AIG event last week. Hope you're able to get into that session you wanted, right? So like I'm referring back to like the last conversation I had with this person. I want to share a quick update. I've recently started offering freelance, and this is where you put your services in. And I'm currently looking to take on new projects. And this is where you would put in your transformation statement, right? Like I help small business owners stand out by creating personal and relatable visuals, whatever it is. But like the transformation statement would go here. And then you want to have a clear ask. hey, if you or anyone you know is looking for help, please reach out to me. And then here's my link. So you just keep it casual. It shouldn't sound too formal. It should sound like you're talking to that person. Um, if they have other questions, they can always follow up. But a letter to your community is really powerful. You don't want to assume that people know what you do or that you're open to work. Like my best friend, we've been best friends for 30 years, I don't know exactly what she does. You know what I mean? So like you just don't want to assume that like, oh, they'll be able to speak about me or they'll be able to share what I do. You want to make it as easy as possible for people to help you or to know about, what you do and how you can help them. Okay, protect your time and get paid. This is about understanding money and communicating boundaries. There are three ways to price your work. You can do it hourly, that's like time and materials. It's flexible, but rewards inefficiency and micromanaging. There's project-based, which is also called milestone or flat fee. And this is where you charge a fixed rate for the entire project or for deliverable. Like if it's a really long project, you could be like, it's a research presentation is going to be X amount. And then the first round of designs is going to be this amount. So you can, if it's a big project with multiple deliverables, you can have a flat fee for each section. Um, and this is predictable cost for the clients. So clients really like that, but it's a high risk of scope creep. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Scope creep is when it's like, oh, we're on our fifth round of revisions. And, that wasn't included, right? Like maybe you forgot to mention how many rounds of revisions were included in your price. And now they want you to do a secondary logo, right? That would be scope creep because if it wasn't in the contract, it wasn't originally discussed in part of the pricing that you originally said, then they're adding more work to your plate, and that's scope creep. And then lastly is value based. This is also called performance pricing. And this is where you're charging a rate based on the perceived value that the service brings. And so this is where you can see where it's really important to have the transformation statement where you want to be talking about your impact because that's valuable to people and that's where they're willing to spend more money. But in order to do value-based pricing, you have to have a really deep understanding of your clients' needs, their budgets, what their goals are. You have to really understand who you're serving. Um, and the value-based pricing is really great because it aligns incentives, right? It can be harder to measure. So pricing in the age of AI, stop hourly pricing immediately. You want to switch to project-based pricing. And you know how we mentioned project-based pricing has a tendency for scope creep, right? Because you've given a flat fee. You've said it's going to cost you this much. And then as the project goes, they're tweak, and it's no fault of their own. Some things change, directions change, but if they start adding more work to what you've initially said, there are seven magic words that you can use to set boundaries. And that is, would you like an estimate for that? And this lets them know that, hey, you're happy to do it. You're happy to do that secondary logo, but it's not part of the original quote price that you quoted. And so that would be additional charge. So setting your rate, there's no perfect formula. I will show you a formula, but it's really about picking a rate, seeing how it lands with your clients, and does it match your needs? Is it working for you? And tweaking it. So even if you want to use a flat fee or project-based fee, which you should, I encourage you to, it's important to estimate what your hourly would be. You keep that behind the scenes. You don't share that, but that helps you gauge like, oh my gosh, this sounds like $10,000 for this project sounds like a lot of money. But yeah, but if it's going to be like 200 hours of your time, what does that end up being hourly, right? Like, so you want to make sure that the project-based fee does align with what you want to be making hourly. But in order to know what you want to make hourly, you need to be able to estimate how long a project takes. And this just takes practice. So, what I would recommend when you're doing projects, freelance projects, document your time so you can see how accurate you are with estimating. We tend to underestimate how long something takes. And if you do that, then you're not going to be making as much money, right? You're going to be undervalued, you're going to be underpricing yourself. Okay, so you want to ask yourself these questions. How much money do you need to make to support your lifestyle? Like, what are your living expenses? How much money do you want to make? Do other freelancers charge for what do other freelancers charge for your kind of similar services? Um, how much money would you make as a full-time employee? What expenses do you have as a business owner? Are your skills in demand? If they're really in demand, you can charge more. And then how much value are you bringing to clients? If you're bringing a lot of value to clients, you can charge more. So here's a formula. Living expenses, and that's like rent and food, car insurance, entertainment, health insurance, savings, right? That's all that stuff. And then your business expenses. So that would be like if you have an LLC, that's your LLC, your yearly fee, it's software license, it's website hosting, materials, business cards, like all that stuff. And then taxes. And you want to set aside 20 to 30% for taxes. This is really important. And a lot of people kind of skip this. Um, it depends on how much you make, is what tax brackets you'll be in. So if you make a lot of money, you're going to pay more in taxes, right? You're going to be in a higher tax bracket. If you don't make as much money, then you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. So I think it's safe for where you're starting out, I would say like 25%, 20 to 25% to set aside for taxes. So you want to add all those up and then you divide it by billable hours, and that's how you get your hourly rate. So let's talk about this a little bit further. So um, you're gonna, by understanding how much you need to make, you will work backwards to find your freelance rate. So you can start by picking a yearly salary that you want to have, and then you calculate how many working hours that is. So let's take, for example, 50K, right? You're like, I want my yearly salary to be 50K, um, and before taxes. And so that means you're working 40 hours a week, five, right? 5 days a week times 8 hours. Um, you take 4 weeks off for vacation, sick days, unexpected absences. So that's 48 working weeks. That ends up being 1,920 hours. So if you divide, 50,000 divided by 1,920, you get $26 an hour is what you need to make to make a $50,000 salary. Now, there's an additional thing to consider. Not all of your hours are billable. So this rate considers that all of your time is billable, and it won't be. In reality, there's many activities you're going to need to do that you can't bill the client for, like invoicing or prospecting for new clients or replying to emails, administrative tasks. There's quite a bit that you're not going to be able to like bill someone for your time. So it typically, on average, freelancers typically spend about 40% of their time on tasks that are not billable. Okay, so now let's do that calculation again. So 48 hours, so 1920 is all of your working hours, right? That's like typical, like 40-hour work weeks with a month of vacation and sick days and all that stuff. Um, and oh wait, oh, here it is. Let me show you. So here, if we do 1920 working hours times 60%, we get 1152 billable hours and 768 non-billable hours. So then you do the calculation again, right? So like now we're just going to focus on the 1152 because those are your billable hours. And of that, how much do you need to make per hour to make 50,000 a year? And you need to make $43 an hour. Okay. So big difference. Um, On the left here, or on the right, you can see the typical billable activities: project planning, strategy, research, design and content creation, revisions and edits, client meetings and consultations, any project-based communicating. It could be location scouting if that's part of the project. So it's anything that was part of the scope that you put in the contract, and we're going to talk about that. Typical non-billable activities are like marketing, so you're marketing your business, promotions, writing blog posts, pitching to new clients, preparing proposals, bookkeeping, invoicing, scheduling, any like ongoing education or training for yourself. Okay, so now let's talk about contracts. So a contract is a freelancer's best friend. A contract is a written agreement between between two parties, and that clearly outlines like the work to be done, who's responsible for what, the terms of payment, timing. A contract covers who's involved, what's to be done, when is it due, how are you going to get paid, what happens if things change. And it is so important to spell this out ahead of time because contracts really protect the relationship. Whenever there's misunderstandings, you can go back to the contract. But if it's not in the contract, then it gets fuzzy and there's like a lot of room for, misunderstanding or miscommunication or, just or blame. So you really want to have a contract because it helps you figure out all of the details ahead of time before you're like in it. So a contract protects both parties. You want to define the scope of work as clearly as you can. So as an example, instead of like logo design, that's pretty broad. Like maybe the client's thinking, yeah, logo design, I want to see like 20 logos. And you're like, logo design, that's three initial concepts and two rounds of revisions, right? So you want to be very prescriptive. You want to be very specific because the more specific you are, the less potential for misunderstanding or miscommunication. Um, Another thing is with a contract, you want to get paid in stages, unless it's like a project that's like a 3-day project, but it's very common to ask for 50% upfront, even if it is like a 1-day thing. Ask for 50% upfront and 50% upon completion. That's very common. That's like the kind of standard. Another thing, if it's like a longer term project, you can ask for like a 30% deposit and then a 40% midway. Like maybe there's a deliverable midway through the project. And so you'd say, 40% when I deliver this thing, and then 30% upon completion. You also want to make sure you decide who owns the final work. Just because you're getting paid to produce work doesn't mean they own it. And that's a lot of people think like, oh, they paid me to do logos or, to do this brand design. But unless it's a work for hire and that's a type of contract, you still own the rights and you're just letting them use what you made. Okay, so a contract really clearly spells that out, but that's something I didn't even realize, in my own business that like when they're paying you, you still own the rights to it unless otherwise stated in the contract. Um, and then the types of things that are in contracts, it's like who's involved, like, who are you, your company, who are they, their company, the scope of work, like what is going to be done, and you want to be as specific as possible. What are the deliverables and the timeline for them? What's the payment terms? Are they paying half of it up front, half of it upon completion? Is it the 30, 40, 30? How many revisions are included in the price and any additional work? And then usage rights and ownership. And then you might want to put in a termination clause or a cancellation clause. And this is good. Like, say you're working on something and the project gets canceled for whatever reason. It's like no one's fault. Something happens, the project gets canceled. You've just done all this work and you haven't gotten paid. So you want to put in like what happens when there's a change? What happens when they want to ask for more work? And that's fine, but you'd give them a new invoice, right? Or what happens when the project, if the project gets canceled early, and people will put in like a 25%, there's all different arrangements, but, and you can do research on this, but I would include that. And then confidentiality, it's optional, but that's usually included in a contract. And then there's a place for signatures for both parties and the date. Um, okay, let's talk about invoice basics because an invoice, this is a formal request for payment. So this is when like, okay, they've agreed they want to hire you and you've agreed to 50% upfront. And so that's when you send them an invoice to pay half of it. So it's agreed upon, yeah, it basically lets a client know, hey, it's time to pay me. Um, and you send an invoice after you've delivered work or a milestone, as stated in the contract. Immediately after a project is completed, do not wait to send an invoice. And then for longer projects, you might invoice in stages. You might send three invoices, maybe one in the beginning because they're going to give you 30% upfront as a deposit. And then maybe in the middle of the project, you send another invoice for 40%. And then at the end, when you've delivered everything, you send in the final invoice for the final 30%. And here you can see what's included, right? There's like the client info, who's it billed to? There's a description of the work. It can be like written. Sometimes I've seen descriptions of work could be like two or three sentences. It doesn't have to be a line item. You can describe it in a sentence or two. There's the payment information, and this is like your banking information, and then a due date. You want to include your information. You want to include taxes if that's applicable. If it's a service, services aren't taxed, I don't believe. But like if it's a product or something that has a sales tax. And then there's line items, if it's multiple things and their totals. And then you want to have an invoice number and an invoice date. And the invoice number, what I do is then I have a spreadsheet and I have a list of all my invoice numbers and who, and so that's a way for me to track the money, like who still owes me money. And so I know who I need to follow up with and like, hey, just checking in on that invoice. Um, so that's really helpful. Okay, so wrapping up. The key takeaways are that you want to define a clear offering. You want to build a site that speaks to clients and their pain points. It's different than a portfolio website. You want to tell people what you do and how you can help them. Know your rate, get things in writing, and send invoices promptly. Um, so with that, I'd love to share some upcoming workshops and then answer any questions that you have. So upcoming workshops that we are offering, we have tax essentials for creative entrepreneurs. I mean, this is honestly, it's going to be information for anyone who is doing taxes for the first time or is a freelancer and wants to know anything about taxes. We also have preparing for the long game, how to future-proof your career. And then we have the art of pitching. So this is for like when you want to, you know, get new clients? How do you present your work? How do you pitch and kind of talk about the work you do? And then as a reminder, you can RSVP to workshops and book one-on-one advising appointments through Connect.